Hello, I'm Jim Carr with the Florida RV Trade Association. We're pleased to be in partnership with SMI Manufacturing to bring to you the following tutorial on the Stay and Play Duo supplemental braking system. This tutorial was filmed live with Brent Shuck at the hitching post in Ocala, Florida. Brent?
Thank you, Jim. As Jim just mentioned, we're here at the hitching post of Ocala in Florida. We're about to do the Stay and Play Duo installation. Now here we'll start by removing the contents from the box as we got it. If you have any questions about the contents of the box, refer to the instructions on page 3. There's a complete listing in detail of the contents. Here we have the operating unit. This is the central part of the installation. It's going to go underneath the hood of the towed vehicle. In this bag we have the components needed to install the unit into the towed vehicle, including the breakaway switch, the fuse holder, wire ties, and all the connectors that you would need. Here we have what's called the G-Force Controller 2. This is the part that has the on-off switch and also the sensitivity adjustment, and is installed within the driver's compartment of the towed vehicle. This is the coach notification bag, which includes the notification LED and also the wiring components necessary to install this item. Here we have the actuating cylinder, which mounts on the brake arm of the towed vehicle. This cylinder, once installed, will physically operate the pedal just as if someone's foot were pushing it. Here we have a length of 15 foot of 1/4 inch DOT airline. This airline is used to connect the operating unit to the cylinder on the brake arm. And of course we have the installation instructions, which also includes a wiring diagram, plumbing diagram, step-by-step instructions, and the warranty card information in the back. If you have any questions during the installation, remember to refer to the operating instructions. Also, if you have any questions, you may call the 800 number, 800-893-3763. Now let's get started by finding a location under the hood for the operating unit. Here we are at our 2009 Honda CR-V, a very popular towed vehicle. We've already popped the hood, and now we're going to begin looking underneath the engine compartment for a location for the operating unit. Remember, the location may not be visible initially, so we'll look around and see, looking beneath the battery, looking kind of behind the grill and the radiator area. The spot that we're going to locate for this particular install is going to be right here on top of this panel. This panel is removable, and we'll remove this panel. We'll mount the operating box with 4 screws in the eyelets on the flange on the box, and then we'll reinstall the panel back on top of the engine. Remember, when determining your location, you want to keep it away from any direct heat source or moving components that could damage or entangle the unit during normal vehicle operation. So right now we're going to remove this panel, taking our 10mm socket and ratchet. Now we'll lift it off. We're going to take our box over, we're going to mark and drill our holes. Now that we have our intake panel out and the Stay and Play Duo operating box centered on it, our tech here, Tony from Hitching Post, is going to mark the holes with a Sharpie. Then he's going to move the box, and taking his cordless drill, he's going to make the appropriate holes for the operating box. Of course, be careful in drilling that the area behind the drill is free and clear from any obstacles.
screwdriver.
And now with the box secured, we'll take the panel and secure it back in location under the hood. Now we'll move on to the breakaway switch. We'll get this from the towed vehicle kit inside the package that we already opened. When locating a spot for the switch, we want to find a place that will allow the switch to be easily accessible, but also, when you're not towing, allow it to be somewhat concealed. Also, keep in mind when determining the location, you don't want it to be the lowest point on the vehicle to protect the switch. Using the provided 1/4 bolt, washer, and locking nut, you can mount the switch so that it can turn to a 90-degree angle when not in tow, and then pivot it straight out for an easy access when you're ready to tow. Since the nut provided is a nylon locking nut, you don't have to worry about it loosening over time. This particular base plate has a spot located already for us for the breakaway switch, so we'll be utilizing this in this installation. For our breakaway switch, we'll take a 7/16 wrench and ratchet, and we'll tighten this up. We'll also take this time to mount the plug for our coach notification light. So we'll remove the jumper that's looped, and we'll take the end that has the red wire over the female side. That way, the power wire is not exposed, but the ground wire is. So we'll cut that, put a length of our provided flex loom over it, then we'll secure it to the side of our breakaway switch with the provided wire ties. Now we'll move on to the vacuum connection. Here I have with me the T and the check valve from the provided kit. This particular vehicle utilizes an 11/32 size hose, so we won't need the provided adapters. First, we'll start by locating the brake booster of the towed vehicle, which is right here behind the master cylinder. We'll follow the line that comes from it and goes down to the engine. This is the line that we're going to be tapping into. We'll select the area of the hose that has enough of a straight part so that our fittings won't encounter any corners. We'll take our hose cutters, we'll cut a section here, and then we'll cut another section, leaving enough place for the barbs of each fitting to go in without touching the other fitting. We'll take some spray silicone, or if you don't have any silicone, you can use dish soap. It'll do the same thing. Put a little bit on our fittings. It'll help it to slide right on these hoses. Now for the T, you want to put the check valve with the bone colored part closer to the T so that the black part will go towards the engine. Since we've added a little bit of length here on the hose, we're going to trim approximately that much off of the hose here under the hood so that everything will still line up properly. Remember again, when installing, you want the black part of the check valve towards the engine. Now we'll route the vacuum hose from the stay-in-play system over to our T. Then we'll cut it to length. Get a little lubricant on our T. And then we'll slide the hose right on. Now we're going to go through the firewall in our CRV. So first we're going to go down and we're going to try to find an existing pass-through in the firewall. The first thing we're going to look for is the main wire harness grommet. Here we see the main wire harness grommet under the dash. It's easily accessible for this vehicle. So what we're going to do is carefully make a slit towards the perimeter of the grommet, furthest away from the wires. Then we're going to pass through a straightened coat hanger and tape our wiring for our G-force controller and the DOT line for the air cylinder and pass it through to the engine compartment. Now that we've secured our wires to our coat hanger and the coat hanger is passed through the grommet, we went ahead and applied a light coat of silicone lubricant to the area that's going to pass through the grommet initially. That'll make for an easy, smooth pull and will also prevent the grommet accidentally pulling through on the other side. Should you need to drill a hole if no existing accesses are available, be sure that you smooth the edge so that the wires don't get nicked or marred, and also, once you're finished, use a high-grade silicone sealant to prevent any exhaust fumes or weather from passing through the firewall. Now that our wire is securely through the firewall, we're going to next locate the brake light switch of the vehicle. Oftentimes newer vehicles have a hush panel or other trim type panel underneath the dash that blocks the view and access to the brake light switch. This vehicle has such a panel, so we're going to remove it before we locate the switch. Often these panels are secured by either plastic tabs or screws. This one happens to have a twist knob on it, so we'll unlock it, we'll pull it down and release the clip on this side, move it out of the way. Then we'll look up under the dash and locate the brake light switch. Now the switch, if you follow the arm up, you'll find it right here. You'll notice there's lots of wires on that switch, so we're going to use a 12-volt poke tester to test for the correct wire. The wire we're looking for on the switch is what's referred to as the cold side of the brake light switch. This wire normally has no voltage on it, but when the pedal is pressed, has 12 volts on it. This wire is also responsible for powering the brake lights of the towed vehicle during normal operation. So we've gone under the dash, we've probed the wires on the switch carefully, and we've located a wire that fits the appropriate description. You can see that the light tester here has no light on it, and then when we press the pedal, the light is active. This wire is the cold side of the switch, and we'll connect our brake notification wire to this wire. If the vehicle's brake lights don't work with the key off, or if you need to disconnect the battery of the vehicle while you're towing, contact SMI at 800-893-3763 for additional instructions. There's a simple fix and we'll be more than happy to walk you through it. We've located the appropriate connectors for this application within the coach notification bag. We'll start off by attaching the 1/4-inch male spade connector to the end of the wire we've already run through the firewall. To do so, strip a length of wire, apply the terminal, and crimp it securely in place. Take the red flip-over connector and close it slightly. That will expose the female slot. You'll plug the male spade into this female slot, just like this. Now once you have it this far, you'll take this groove, place it over the wire, close the cap, and then crimp in place with a pair of pliers. Now we're going to mount the G-force controller in the towed vehicle. Most of the time we're going to mount it here on the toe kick, directly beside the brake pedal, where the driver's left foot would normally go. We're going to mount it up high enough so that it doesn't interfere with normal driving, but also low enough so that the on-off toggle switch is easily accessible. So we'll line it up with a slight angle downward, this way. We're going to mark our holes with a Sharpie. And then we're going to check for any wires or obstructions that may be behind this panel that we can't see before we put in the screws. And then we'll take our screws and mount the box securely. After we've mounted the box, we're going to take a length of the provided flex loom to conceal the wires and make for a nice, neat installation. Okay, now we'll prepare to mount the cylinder. We've removed the cylinder, the anchor, and the provided self-tapping screw from the installation bag. To prepare, remove the nuts from the cylinder and separate the two brackets. The cylinder will mount with the brake arm in between these two brackets, and then will be secured with the nuts, tightening the brackets together onto the brake arm. Then the bracket here for the tie down will go down on the firewall and will be secured with a self-tapping screw. Once we have the cylinder loosely secured, we'll kind of size up the bracket onto the firewall and see where we want to secure it. Ideally, the bracket will be located 1 inch above center and in line with the cylinder, so that when the brake pedal swings, it'll pull that cable right into line with the cylinder. Once we've located a spot, we'll trim an access point through the insulation and then verify the clearance on the other side of the firewall to make sure that we don't hit any obstructions. Before tightening down the cable and securing the lug, it's a good idea at this point to go ahead and tighten down the nuts onto the cylinder so that it does not move from the location. Also notice that the cylinder is high enough so that it will not interfere with the foot of the driver during normal operation of the vehicle. When tightening, you don't want to overly deform the bracket as it is aluminum, but you want a slight bend in it as it will act as a locking washer mechanism. When tightening down the screw, you want to be careful not to over tighten it so that it strips, and you also want to make sure that you get it nice and snug so that the lug will not rotate freely. Once you've secured it, you may now tighten the cable down in the clamp. Be sure that the cable is double looped through to prevent any unwanted movement in the cable during activation. Also keep in mind when tightening down the set screw that you will actually be making the cable tighter as you tighten the screw down, so leave a little bit of extra slack in to compensate for that before tightening. After it's all tight, you want to be able to move the cable to the far left and to the far right, and that distance to be about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Now that the cable is secured and the cylinder is tightly fastened to the brake arm, we're going to go ahead and insert the hose into the back of the cylinder. To do so, make sure the hose is routed in a fashion where it will not come into contact with any moving parts such as the emergency brake or the steering column, and also that it won't interfere with the driver's foot during normal operation of the vehicle. Also make sure it's routed to avoid kinks or any unnecessarily sharp bends. After you've done this, take a pair of razor blade type cutters which will provide a good clean edge. Make sure you cut it as straight as possible and insert it into the air fitting on the cylinder. You'll feel it click once and then click twice. After the second click, it's in there nice and tight. Should you need to remove it, simply put your thumbnail on that outer ring of the fitting, push the hose in gently, and pull it out. To reinsert, just follow the appropriate procedure of pushing it in firmly. We've now wrapped up the inside of the towed vehicle, so we're going to come out under the hood and begin the wiring. Firstly, we need to locate the tow wiring, as that is the activation signal for the brake light input. Here we found it directly on top of the engine compartment. This is a standard 4-wire connection, in where the brown wire is operating the running lights, the yellow wire is the left turn and also the brake light, the green wire is the right turn and also the right brake light. So we're going to attach our green and our yellow wire to the green and yellow wires here. Now, should you have a system that incorporates a separate brake light wire from the turn signal wires, you'll attach the yellow and the green wire to that wire. So we'll start by using some of the provided flex loom to conceal the wires that we've routed through the firewall for a nice clean installation. In dealing with the tow wiring, it's imperative that the ground of the tow wiring have continuity with the ground of the towed vehicle. Our system must be able to use the power that the coach provides through the tow wiring to activate the system, which is powered from the towed vehicle's battery. So we know underneath here that the ground wire is attached to the frame, so we're good there. Otherwise, we'd run a lead from the white wire from here to the ground. If you have bonded wire, which many times you will, the easiest way to separate it safely is to start in between with the razor knife and then move away from the sharp edge of the blade. If you move towards the sharp edge of the blade, you're very likely that you will trim the copper in between the two wires, and that can cause a short. By going against the blunt edge of the blade, you'll just merely push the two wires apart, keeping the casing intact. Now we'll take our green wire from the SMI harness and attach it to the green wire of the tow wiring using the provided blue Scotch Lot connectors in the install kit. To do so, simply slide the outer edge of the connector over the wire that you're tapping into, take the SMI green wire, trim it to length, and insert it securely to the deeper end of the Scotch Lot connector. While holding constant pressure on the wire to make sure it doesn't move out of reach of the blade, take a pair of pliers and squeeze the blade down. The connector should now be flush on top with the spade. Flip the door over to secure the connection and verify by tugging gently to make sure that the wires are securely fastened. Then we'll also attach the yellow wire at this time to the yellow wire of the tow wiring. It often helps to kind of stagger your connections so that they'll lay more flatly once you've finished, which will make it for a less bulky connection under the tape. Now that they're secured, we'll put them together and we'll wrap it with a high quality electrical tape to ensure that it's waterproof for maximum longevity of the connection. Now we'll make the ground connection for the installation. Remember, as I mentioned before, the ground for this system must also have continuity to the tow wiring for proper operation. We'll begin by taking the white wire, stripping it, and putting the ring terminal on. It's not recommended to use the battery as a ground, as mechanics may change the battery in the future and forget to put the ring terminal back on, causing improper function of the system. We've looked around and couldn't find an existing ground suitable for our operation, so we're going to create our own by using a self-tapping screw into a piece of sheet metal under the hood. Of course, as always, when drilling in the towed vehicle anywhere, you want to make sure that the area behind where you're drilling is free from any obstacles that may be damaged from the screw going through. We've now run the wires from the breakaway switch up to the engine compartment so that we can connect them in with the unit. Now up here we're going to find a power supply for the operating unit. So to do so, we're going to find the fuse block under the hood. We're going to remove the top, and it's going to expose the input terminals. We recommend not going to the battery, as techs may remove the terminal and forget to replace it after the battery is back in place. So we're going to take our wrench here, 8mm for this vehicle. We're going to loosen this stud. Now use extreme caution when loosening these terminals, as they're on an unfused power source, which means that if you were to ground it out, there would be no fuse protection to keep it from continuing to arc. Once we remove the screw, we'll place it in a safe location so we won't lose it or knock it down. We'll take the fuse holder from the installation kit and we're going to cut it. On one end, we'll strip it using the provided ring terminal. We'll crimp that on there and then take it over to the location. Now, as we can see, there's a lip which is preventing the terminal from freely going down into the location. So we're just going to take a box knife here and cut a little notch. Then take our pair of pliers and twist it out. Now the terminal will be able to freely go down for the mounting. Again, using extreme caution, we're going to tighten this down, making sure not to come in contact with any grounds with the ratchet. Also, verify that the fuse is not in the fuse holder. If it were to be in the fuse holder and this were to touch a ground, then the fuse would be blown and would be useless. Now we'll replace the lid onto our fuse block. It looks like we're getting a little resistance here from the terminal again. So in a like manner as we did with the bottom piece, we'll trim a little channel for the terminal to be exposed. And then we'll take our pliers and we'll break that little tab off. Now the box can close completely. On this end of the fuse holder, we'll take the provided 3-way crimp connector from the installation bag. We'll crimp it on. Then we'll take the orange and black striped wire which comes up from the breakaway switch, trim it to length, and we'll crimp it into one of the ends of the 3-way connector. Then in the wiring from the operating unit, which we've routed over to this location, we're going to take the brown wire and we're going to trim it to length, and we're also going to hook that into the other end of the 3-way connector. As with all of your connections, especially under the hood, be sure to use a high quality electrical tape to seal the connection from weather. This will ensure that it doesn't corrode and lose connection in the future. Now we're going to take our red and black wire, which are coming from the controller inside the towed vehicle, and connect them to the red and the black wire from the operating unit we've mounted under the hood. And again, we're going to wrap these with our electrical tape. Now we'll take the blue wire from the operating unit and connect it directly to the blue wire coming up from the breakaway switch on the front of the car. Now that we've completed the wiring under the hood, we're going to neaten everything up, cover any exposed wires with the provided flex loom, and then proceed to the next step. Now we'll take the hose from the cylinder that we've routed under the hood to the operating unit and connect it. Again, in routing, make sure that you avoid any bends, kinks, moving objects, or direct heat sources that could damage the hose. We've measured, we'll make a cut with our razor blade cutters for a nice clean straight edge, and then we'll insert it into the fitting just as the fitting on the cylinder. 2 clicks, make sure it's hold. Then as a final step under the hood, we'll insert the 20 amp fuse into the fuse holder. And we're done under the hood. Then lastly, if you haven't done so already, we'll insert the breakaway dead plug into the breakaway switch. This pin can only go in one direction. You can see that it makes an eye. It'll line up in the channels. Push with your thumb. You don't want to get your finger behind that tab, otherwise it could pinch and you'll feel it snap into place. The first 3 to 4 times that you remove the pin will be pretty stiff, but after the switch is broken in, it'll be removed in and out easily. Should you find it too difficult, you can use a WD-40 or a silicone lubricant to aid in breaking the switch in. The last step before we test the unit is to put the coach notification light on the tow bar. We've removed the light from the kit and also the other end of the plug, which we mounted on the breakaway switch. We've connected it using the provided butt connector so that the red wire receives power and the black wire is a ground. Since we've already wired it up, we're going to use some of the provided flex loom to conceal this wire and also give it a little protection from any damage it may receive outside. Okay. Now that we have the loom in place on the light, we're ready to mount it onto the tow bar. The purpose of this light is to illuminate when the brakes are active to be visible in the backup camera. We're going to angle it slightly using the provided 2-sided tape towards the backup camera to give it a little bit more direct angle towards the camera when the tow bar is on the coach. Then to secure it, we're going to use the provided wire ties and pull them securely against the light. When positioning the wire ties, you want to make certain that the wire tie does not conceal any of the LED bulbs so that you get a nice bright image in the backup camera. Now we're ready to test the installation. In order to test the Duo, you have to have both signals for the activation, the first being the brake lights and the second being inertia. Now the inertia switch is configured so that it can operate while stationary in the most sensitive position. So the ideal situation is to hook up the motorhome tow wiring to the towed vehicle and have somebody apply the brakes for this procedure. If that's not available, you can run a wire from the power side of the battery down to the front of the tow wiring on the vehicle to illuminate the tow wiring lights to simulate the brake lights being on from the coach. After you verify that the tow wiring is active, turn the on switch of the controller on and then lower the knob down until the unit activates. You'll see as it activates, it pulls the pedal down. If it does not activate, you may need to verify the fuse's connection in the fuse holder, or the controller may be tilted with too much of an angle backwards, preventing it from activating with the inertia switch. We can see here that everything is fine, so to set the initial sensitivity, we'll go down till it activates, we'll raise it up slowly until it shuts off, and then we'll go up another 1/8 of an inch and lock the knob down. This is a good starting position for the sensitivity. Should you find that the brakes are coming on too often while towing, raise the knob up approximately 1/8 of an inch. If you find that it's coming on not often enough while towing, you can lower it down to 1/8 of an inch and increase the activation. Now we're ready for the final phase in testing the Stay and Play Duo system. Here we're going to pull the breakaway pin and we'll hear the pump engage and the brake pedal will depress in the towed vehicle. When the brake pedal depresses, we'll notice that the blue lights on this tow bar mounted coach notification monitor will illuminate. If for some reason the pump fails to operate, be sure to check the fuse and also the on-off toggle switch under the hood. This now sums up the installation for the Stay and Play Duo system. If you should have any further questions, feel free to contact us at 800-893-3763. Thank you and enjoy your many miles of worry-free, trouble-free towing with your new SMI Stay and Play braking system.